Hello, and thanks for tuning into Town Meeting TV's coverage of General Election 2024. This program is part of a series of candidate forums that we are producing in advance of the election on November 5th. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriters. You can find all of these forums, including this one, at cctv.org/general or on our Town Meeting TV's YouTube page. You can click subscribe and they will send you more content like this. On tonight's program, we're going to hear from two candidates running for the Chittenden, 24, one seat in the Chittenden 24 district. We have incumbent Alyssa Black, a Democrat, and Ron Lawrence, a Republican, running, and we're going to start with opening statements. We have prepared a list of questions. You have about 90 seconds to answer each question. If you're watching from home and you want to call 802-862-3966 with your questions, we will take those as well. So let's get started with the opening statements, and we're going to start with you, Alyssa Black, as our incumbent seated legislator. Why are you running, and what experience qualifies you to serve as a state representative?
Thank you, and thank you, Meghan. Thank you for having us. So I'm Representative Alyssa Black. I am running for my third term in the legislature. So let's see, I guess I've done two of these so far.
What brought you to this? Yeah.
Well, what brought me to it was I had worked on some legislation as a citizen, and the whole legislative process was very fascinating to me, and I worked very hard on this, and I thought I was very successful. It was unable, a governor's veto was unable to be overridden on that, and I just sort of thought, I really want to get this through. It was my driving force at the time. And I thought I could work better from inside the legislature than from outside. And I have a couple accomplishments that I'm really proud of. And one of the accomplishments is that not only did and this was in 2021, we did pass a bill that I had introduced, shepherded through both the House and the Senate. The governor actually let it go into law without his signature, and that was H.230, which was a major piece of gun violence prevention. It enacted a waiting period as well as safe storage provisions, which the state never had before, and some red flag laws.
Great, thank you, and we can get into that a little more, but we'll please tell us why you're running and what experience qualifies you, Ron. Thank you.
I'm Ron Lawrence, again, running in Essex 24. And the short answer is I really feel like somebody needs to. I represent a departure, I think, from the current trend of our legislature. I've been actively engaged in community issues since 2000 or before. I'm a former school board chair. I've been, as the chair of the Essex Republicans, I've been involved in our political discourse for a lot of years. I bring a long history of thrift, which I believe is needed right now. Our tax burden is too high. And I'd like to make a case for reducing central control and encouraging competition, particularly in the areas of education, healthcare, housing, and energy.
Great, thanks so much. We're going to move on to the first question that we have here, property taxes and education. This year, many Vermonters will see a double-digit increase in their property taxes, and nearly a third of school budgets failed on town meeting day. How will you approach education funding reform and property taxes for the coming fiscal year? And I know it's hard if you're not seated in the legislature to be specific, but as specifically as you can, give us the solutions, not just describe the problem. Ron, thank you.
Sure. Well, one of the things I can point out is that as school board chair, I came on board, well, I wasn't chair to begin with, but I came on board and we were seeing double-digit increases in the budget for several years before. through the 3 years that I was on the school board, we managed to whittle that down to 3%. So we were successful in tailoring back the expenses of the school without sacrificing the services of the school. I do think the Vermonters have spoken clearly. I think we are concerned about the the quality of the education that we're seeing right now in our schools, and the costs certainly. Education is a huge priority. I say that aside from national defense, it is second in line as far as priorities go. But I think we need to focus on the academics, and I think we need to get away from some of the social activism. I'm a supporter of school choice. I believe that competition is the remedy for many of the issues that we're facing in our schools. And I think that school choice supports families and parents' roles in raising their children and educating their children.
Okay, thank you very much. And Alyssa, the same question to you on property taxes, and what can the legislature, what would you do in the legislature to approach funding reform and property taxes for the coming year?
Well, this is certainly probably the top issue, top priority for voters, and I can assure you that it is the top priority for legislators as well. We absolutely recognize the impact that this has had on taxpayers, and frankly, the current model of funding our education system in the state of Vermont is just unsustainable. We have some really hard decisions that we need to make, and we have set in place in this last legislative session mechanisms where we're studying this issue right now, and we've sort of begun the work on that. And I really look forward to, in our next session, transitioning our whole model of how we fund education. But we really need to ensure that the decisions that we're making, that they allow us to develop, a system that continues to provide the high quality of education that all of our kids deserve, but it has to be at a price that taxpayers can afford. This year, frankly, we were presented with a huge increased bill from voter-approved budgets. And I'm really proud that we came up with fiscally responsible ways to pay that bill, and we were able to reduce the tax burden by a significant percentage by what we were originally handed. And I want to reiterate this. The legislature, we don't decide how much to spend. Individual voters vote on their school budgets and hand the state the bill, and we are simply required by statute to fund that bill. And I think we did a good job, but I'm looking forward to ways in which we can come up with a new funding model.
Great, thanks so much. We're going to move on to housing. Couple big issues. This past session, Democrats and progressives in the House proposed spending an additional $100 million per year for 10 years on publicly subsidized affordable housing. This is long-term housing, not emergency housing. This was not passed in the Senate. Would you support this level of public investment in housing? If yes, if not, what would you do to meet what seems to be a housing crisis in Vermont? And we're going to start with you, Representative Black.
Well, yes, I do support that. I voted as a member of the House. I voted in support of that before it went to the Senate. I think that making a significant investment in housing is really critical, and it lifts up all Vermonters. Not only is housing a basic need, but it's absolutely vital to our economy. It allows our workforce and our communities to grow, our ability to provide services, and for businesses to thrive. We also have a huge demographic problem in Vermont. Vermont is one of the oldest states in the country, and Vermonters are aging at an enormous clip. We need affordable housing. We have to support younger generations to be able to move here, live here, stay here, and be able to afford and live and work here so that they're able to provide services for our older generation and support our aging population. We need families and kids so that we can thrive. I think that it's estimated, I read 24 to 39,000 more units of housing are needed in the next 5 years. I mean, frankly, that seems like an impossible task, and it is an impossible task, but because it's impossible doesn't mean that we do nothing. And it's frankly an area of investment where we need to go big.
Thanks. Thanks for that specifics. And Ron Lawrence, this question to you on housing. Would you support this kind of investment in public housing, and what's your thoughts on the housing crisis?
Well, let me start by saying that I do feel a need to care for each other. You know, we need to address some of the things that are causing this problem to begin with. But I don't believe in the subsidizing of housing. I think that the private sector can and will provide housing that will meet the needs of our people if we can kind of get out of their way. Act 250 was really designed to be a stumbling block for building. You know, it's been there for some time, and we're talking about reforming it now, but it has significantly increased the risk to builders. Former member of the Home Builders Association, I have heard the stories that builders have gone through in dealing with Act 250 and permitting. It feels like recent changes are trying to funnel people into development centers, if you will, and I think most people are here in Vermont because they really like the rural setting. I'm not really in favor of that kind of management of our housing. I also think that by that kind of artificial control, you're diminishing the value of rural land. You know, farmers have been working that land for generations, and it's not fair to them to take away the value of their property by encouraging building elsewhere.
Great.
That'll do it for me.
Great, thanks so much. We're going to move on to emergency shelter, which is sort of a cousin to this issue of long-term housing. Vermont reported 3,295 people, a very specific number, experiencing homelessness in 2023. That was more than doubled since 2020. This year, the state is rolling back its pandemic-era emergency shelter capacity across the state, pushing hundreds more Vermonters into the streets. How will you approach the need for emergency shelter in the coming session, and how should the state pay for it, if you do believe the state should pay for it? And Ron, we're going to start with you on that question. Does the state have a role, and what would you do in the legislature around this question?
Well, affordability is definitely an issue here. It feels to me like the state has been largely responsible for taxing people and limiting the housing, raising the cost of heating, and I think that has resulted in more homelessness. I don't think we can do all of that and then, you know, when people are driven from their homes, also pay for all their needs. I think that we need to change the picture. The hotel program, I think, is a perfect example of why government's really not the answer when it comes to meeting the needs of the market. Not generally in favor of government benefits as a handout sort of thing. That creates a dependency that I believe that doesn't help the very people that we're trying to help. I would like to see our area, our communities of faith and the local charities play a bigger role in rebuilding community. I really think that's the key to building a safety net that works for everybody.
Okay, thanks so much. So, great. Alyssa, this question to you. What would you have the legislature do in the coming session around emergency shelter?
Well, as we talked about in the housing question before, I mean, housing is essential, and absolutely everyone deserves access to safe and affordable housing. Unfortunately, right now, as I mentioned, we need so many more housing units that it has driven the price of the housing that we do have significantly up. The pandemic era funding, it really actually showed us that there are ways that we can ensure everyone has access to housing. Unfortunately, funds are no longer available on the federal level, and it leaves us in this current situation in determining, what we can sustain with the funds that we actually do have available. And there are so many competing budget items in a year, and the funds are limited, and we've had to make some really hard choices about what we can provide. We also have to be really cognizant that housing is really deeply connected to healthcare, public safety, criminal justice, and our workforce. And all our decisions that we make around this have downstream consequences. My approach in the next session would being making sure that we are ensuring that we protect those that are the most vulnerable, and then as well that we are investing in affordable housing.
Great, thanks so much. We're going to move on to public safety and criminal justice. Public safety is a top priority for many voters in this election. This past session, lawmakers increased judicial staff, increased retail theft penalties, and expanded restorative justice practices in Vermont. What would you do in the legislature to advance public safety and repair Vermont's criminal justice system? And Representative Black, we're going to start with you on this question.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for highlighting some of the really good work that we did on these issues from the past session, and I was very excited to support that work that was being done. Looking forward, I think what we need to do is we need to ensure that the changes that we've made are being implemented correctly, and that they're having the intended effect, and be nimble enough to make adjustments where need be. The legislation last year was really intended to reduce the timeline to judgment. There's so many reasons why justice is currently being delayed. There's judge vacancies, backlogs. There were geographic discrepancies in our use of restorative justice. In a lot of ways, it's sort of leading to the perception that crime is not being addressed, and that's not necessarily the case. We learned last year that crime really isn't going up. It's just the perception. It's that we have such a backlog that things are not being brought to justice efficiently. So really, next session, I feel like we should ensure that what we've put in place in this past session is having its intended results. And we need to make the system more efficient and then make changes where needed.
Great. Thanks. Ron, your response on this question around public safety and criminal justice. What would you do in the legislature?
I think what we don't do is demoralize our police and not prosecute crimes. Those are things that have been, in our recent history here. I'll say it again, we don't get there by demoralizing our police. We really need to, I think we've done a great disservice to our state and local police. I think we need to rebuild confidence there and pave the way to build better relationships between our police and the communities they serve. I've actually been to our prisons. I believe in the concept of restorative justice. I think that throwing people in jail and forgetting about them is a terrible waste. And it's not necessarily good justice. I think that the prison system can be reformed in very positive ways, but there does need to be a consequence for crime. And people do need to take ownership for their actions.
Is that it? I guess I would also be remiss in not, since you're both in Essex and there's the proposed women's prison in Essex, and Ron, we'll start with you, and then Alyssa, your thoughts on this proposed women's prison, removing.
I know that there are a lot of folks who are sort of up in arms about it. There's a lot of questions just around, is this necessary? Does it make sense? Does it make sense for Essex? Again, I've had the opportunity to go to visit our prisons on a number of occasions, and there's a lot of room for improvement. Okay, whether we need to build a new building to make that improvement, I don't know. I need to know more. But I'm also a builder. I have a firm belief that we can take the buildings that we have and make them better.
Okay, thank you.
Well, first of all, the current women's correctional facility is deplorable. It should have been shut down a long time ago. The state has been working on ways to make it better. It is not able to be renovated. It does not meet the needs of the staff at the correctional facility, and it certainly doesn't meet the needs of the people within the system. I know that the state worked long and hard looking at sites all over. It was really important that they keep it in Chittenden County because that is where their workforce is, and this workforce is specifically trained to work with women. And it just so happens that 2 state-owned lands were in Essex. I think both sites are good. I personally have a preference over one site over the other. But I also know that the proposal for this facility is based upon a current Scandinavian model and the Maine Women's Correctional Facility. And the most striking thing that I got from the Department of Corrections in briefings on this, our current recidivism rate for women is 42%. In Maine, since they built that correctional facility, they have not had one woman come back into the system. It is at 0 currently.
Thank you both for weighing in on that and tolerating an add-on question.
I feel very strongly about this.
Yeah,
so.
that's great.
It's fine.
So I'm going to move on to the Progressive Tax Initiative question, and then we'll come back to the lightning round. This year, Democrats and progressives in the House proposed new taxes on the state's highest earners and largest assets, including an increased income tax on earners over $500,000, an increased transfer tax on properties over $750,000, and an increased corporate income tax. These new taxes largely did not make it through the Senate. Do you support raising taxes on high earners and wealthy Vermonters? And we are going to go, I think we're going to go to you, Ron, to start this question.
Okay. In short, no. I'm not in favor of adding additional taxes to the wealthy. When I have looked at our tax revenues and the statistics for where they come from, the wealthy are already paying an enormous share of our tax revenues. I think that raising taxes, if you're wealthy enough not to have to worry about that, the burden winds up falling to the middle class, and we're losing people. And those are people. Those are our working people. Many have left the state because it's just too darn expensive to live here. One of the things that I like to tell people is that corporations, some people are going to think this is crazy, but corporations do not pay taxes. This is an expense to them. They have no choice but to pass that on to their consumers. So it's you and I who really wind up paying those taxes, even if you think that you attribute it to corporations. What we really need to do is spend less. We got an $8.5 billion budget, okay, for 640,000 people. That's 13,000 plus for every man, woman, and child in the state. And that means a family of 4 needs to overcome $52,000 of state spending in a year. That's just way out of line.
Great. Thanks so much. And Rep. Black, on this question of these progressive income taxes.
So I supported these. If you look at the curve of the percentage of income that falls on tax burden, the highest tax burden falls on the middle class. It drops precipitously after that. You know, when you talk about raising income taxes on those making over 500,000, this is, you know, their taxable wages. And it's not that you raise income tax on all of that, it's the amount over $500,000. So if you make $550,000, there was a small increase on that $50,000. There was also a corporate tax, which, I mean, it's important, you know, people talk about, well, we don't want to hurt businesses in Vermont. Corporate taxes are paid on the income for things that are sold in Vermont. And it's based upon the amount that corporations pay in federal taxes, and then it is, you know, based on sales in the state of Vermont. So we're not talking about businesses in the state of Vermont. We're talking about, you know, huge multinational corporations. And by the way, it's a federal tax that has a deduction on it right now, which the feds are actually rolling back. We were just rolling that back a little bit. And I will be honest with you, I was actually very upset that the Senate did not. I'm sorry, I have to talk about this. Yep. I was very upset that the Senate did not move forward with that, because specifically the amount of money, and it was $10 million, was being earmarked for a program, and I serve on House Health Care, and I worked on this all year. It was to pay for what is called the Medicare Savings Program, and for $10 million, the state of Vermont could have invested in this, and the federal government would have directly put over $100 million back into the pockets of Vermonters over the age of 65 and those who are disabled, people on Medicare.
Thank you.
To me, $10 million to put $100 million in the pockets of Vermonters, that is money well spent, and that is making Vermont more affordable.
Great. Ron, did you want to add anything at this point? That's okay.
The only thing I would add is that, you know, those are some good points, but really what you're talking about is setting priorities within our budget, and the money comes from taxpayers anyway. So whether it's federal money or state money, we're paying those tax dollars. If we get more than our normal fair share, then somebody else is paying into that. So.
All right, we're going to move on to a lightning round of questions that we have here. And we will go back and forth, and I think that was Ron we started with, and then Representative Black. So we're going to start with you. Should private schools be funded with public dollars?
No.
Absolutely, if as long as the choice is not compelled. Okay.
Public dollars should go to public schools.
Great.
Ensure every child has equal access to a high-quality education.
We're doing 10 seconds.
Yes. Well, I said no, and then she moved on. So.
Do you support raising the age of family court jurisdiction?
I got to be honest, this is really not on my radar. Okay, the little bit that I've looked at it, I'm skeptical, but I wouldn't call it a priority for me.
Mm-hmm. I had to phone a friend on this one because, like Ron, I'm not sure what that is. I think it's currently 10. It seems awfully young to me. I believe that we have far more restorative ways in dealing with harmful behavior in young children.
Great.
Just as a quick, I believe that the report that was prepared talks about 18 and 19-year-olds.
It's raising it to 19.
Oh, okay.
It's raising it up to 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So should biomass...
Take a pass on that question then.
Should biomass, burning wood, play a role in emission reduction strategies?
As long as it makes sense with our current plans to reduce emissions.
No, I think you're talking about penalizing people who are already struggling to heat their homes, and no, I think that
so you would agree that burning wood
should not be part of our emissions plans, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so you burning wood, good, okay. Do you support a statewide ban on assault weapons?
No.
Yes, actually I intend to introduce this legislation next year.
Great, thanks. Did Governor Scott overstep his authority appointing Zoe Saunders as interim ed secretary? And that's kind of old news, but we're here, still here.
Despite the court's ruling, personally, I thought yes. It is very clear that secretaries are appointed with the advice and the consent of the Senate, and they did not do that, and he completely overstepped that.
No, I don't. I'm chuckling because clearly we were giving people the choice here. But no, I think that division is really a symptom of the division in our state. That the governor has the right to appoint a secretary and
Interim.
yeah,
Yeah. Where do you get your news, Ron?
a variety of places, but generally not from television.
Okay.
I can pin it down to 3: WCAX, Vermont Digger, 7 days. I watch the nightly national news, but I cut off my cable except down to basic several years ago, and so I don't get any other news channels. Frankly, it's been much better for my mental health, to be honest with you.
Great. Do you ride the bus?
No, I don't, but I do think that public transportation is very important for a vibrant community. My car is a luxury.
Yeah.
Having a car is a luxury.
And Ron?
No, I don't. I live in rural Essex, and there's a bus that goes through maybe twice a day. I work out of my home anyway. It's not reasonable. But I do agree that public transportation is an important thing in the right setting.
Yeah. And what's your favorite ice cream in Vermont, Ron?
Palmer's Maple Creamies on Route 15 in Jericho. They are the best in the state, and I've tried a few.
Can we agree on this one? No, just go ahead.
This may be controversial and might lose me a few votes. And I only like maple syrup if it's on pancakes or waffles. I'm not a big maple, but I am a massive convert living in Vermont as long as I have to the maple creamy. But I'm going to shout out to Vermont Cookie Love, because Vermont Cookie Love makes an affogato, which, if you don't know, that's ice cream with a big shot of espresso over it. And that combines my 2 favorite things, ice cream and coffee. So you can't go wrong with that.
Super. Well, we have, I think we're over time, which is fine, and we're going to go in reverse order. We're going to start with you, Rep. Black, about closing statements. Just 30 seconds. Tell us how people can find information about you and get in touch with you.
Well, you can email me at any time. And I do post, I'm not going to say it on television, but I do post my phone number all the time, and that is my cell phone. You're getting Alyssa's cell phone. So yeah, if anyone needs to reach out, has any questions, concerns, then I'm more than happy to talk with them.
Okay.
And this has been the honor of my life, honestly. It is an absolute honor to serve, and I'm asking for your vote so that I can continue working on the things that share our community's values.
Okay. Thanks. And Ron, short.
Well, I'm here because I feel like we need to depart from our current course. I think we've been on a trend of centralizing authority, setting up bureaucracies and committees, and people that serve on these things. They may be very good people, but they're unelected, and I'm not sure that that's what our representative government really calls for. Healthcare, education, housing, and energy, these are really key aspects of our lives, and putting all those things into the control of our government is I think, a mistake. And it's never a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket. I think encouraging competition is the answer to most of these issues, and I really think it's time for a different direction. So I'm asking for people to think about that.
Thanks. Thank you, Ron Lawrence and Rep. Alyssa Black, for joining us tonight. These are folks competing for the 1 seat in Chittenden 24 district. Thank you for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of local candidates, local budget, and ballot items. You can watch this and other forums like it at cctv.org/general. And you should have received a ballot already. by mail, and if you have not, reach out to your local clerk's office to vote now or anytime up until 7 p.m. on November 5th. So thanks for watching, and thanks for tuning in.